Hi, 8th grade. We're here for social studies story time. I know it sounds silly, but that's what I tell you in class all the time anyway. And I'm here in an armchair next to a fireplace in my basement, so it's very appropriate for today. So, it's been a little while since you guys have taken any notes. My kid is laughing at me. Yeah, she's not going to be laughing that long. We are in our book, United States Government, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 8, the Federal Courts and the Judicial Branch, Section 1, which is the federal court system. So, in this section, you should be learning the United States has a dual court system. The Judiciary Act of 1789 organized the federal courts into 3 tiers. Today, these tiers consist of the district courts, the courts of appeals, and the Supreme Court. And through its powers, the judicial review, the judicial branch, plays a critical role in the system of checks and balances. You remember checks and balances are an important part of how our government functions, so that we have those 3 branches and no branch has too much power. They have shared responsibility to make sure that things stay fair. So, it's been a little while since we have had social studies story time because, we had spring break, and then our 2 weeks when we came back have not been in school, and we've been doing kind of an independent project during that time. So we're getting back to our book a little bit now because we got to. I know it's everyone's favorite. But I know you haven't taken notes because we haven't been reading together. So I have, come here. I have a helper. This is my daughter, Caitlin. Some of you met her at school. Your bangs look terrible. Wow. Okay. Anyway, she is a 4th grader. And Kate, have you ever done outline notes before?
No.
No, she's never done them before. You guys have done them with me. So I'm teaching her how to do it. She is going to be my helper. She already started here on her notes, right? So if she can do it, you guys can all do it, right? Yeah, of course. So she's going to help us out because it's hard for me to read and write it down without a board and stuff. So she's going to write them today and give us a little bit of help with that. And then I'll show you so that you can see exactly what your notes should look like, give you that quick reminder. Also, for this section, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 vocabulary words. Look at that. Long list. There they are. You can pause the screen if you need to. Yay. Okay. However, you don't have to write them in your notes. Yay! We're all really excited about that. Yeah, Kate's very excited. Yeah, she was not stoked about 11 vocabulary words. However, you do need to know what they mean. So, we're going to use Quizlet this week. You guys have really enjoyed Quizlet, so you're going to go on Quizlet and practice your words there. If you show me that you did... Oh, look at that. We love the Quizlet. If you can show me, send me a screenshot or a picture of your Quizlet. If you show me you've done Quizlet, you don't need to have these in your notes. It won't count against you for not having them. Quizlet's way more fun. It's way easier. Kate wants me to move on. She's excited for the story. Yay. Okay, so, but our vocab words for this section only are jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction, plaintiff, defendant, original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction, judicial restraint, judicial activism, precedent, and senatorial courtesy. Wow. See, I'm even struggling. So, 11 words just for this section. This chapter has a ton of vocab. So, that's part of why I really would rather you just use the Quizlet. It's more fun. You'll learn it more effectively. Alright, so what we've all been waiting for, I know you just cannot, you're so excited. The federal court system. A dramatic confrontation. Judicial independence. The Constitution, the Supreme Court, the ultimate interpreter of the law. Oh, sorry, the Constitution. I can't even read. The Constitution makes the Supreme Court the ultimate interpreter of the law. The Constitution also gives Congress the power to impeach Supreme Court justices. Are these two powers compatible? If Congress can remove a Supreme Court justice for his or her opinions, how can the Supreme Court be free to rule on cases before it? Does that threat of impeachment undermine judicial independence? That very question was at stake in a dramatic confrontation that shook Washington, D.C. in 1805. The majority party in Congress, the Democratic Republicans, tried to impeach a sitting Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Chase. Chase was a committed Federalist with a habit of speaking out on political issues and involving himself in party politics. That behavior prompted Democratic Republicans to question his fairness. The House of Representatives, which was controlled by the Democratic Republicans, brought impeachment charges against Chase, alleging judicial misconduct. John Randolph, leader of the Democratic Republicans in the House, was appointed manager of the subsequent trial in the Senate. Randolph presented an unconvincing case for conviction. Justice Chase mustered an impressive array of legal talent in his defense. Even better for Chase, some of Randolph's allies began to wonder if impeachment would set a dangerous precedent. In the end, too few senators voted to convict Chase, and the justice managed to save his job. Historians count Chase's acquittal as a victory for judicial independence. Judges today rule without fear of politically motivated impeachment charges. There is a consensus that judges can only be removed for serious misconduct. Judicial independence remains the cornerstone of our federal court system. And then here is a picture of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase. Right, you can read along in this if you printed your packet at home or if you picked one up at school. Feel free to write on it. That's fine. Great way to take notes is underlining or highlighting. You should know that, right? All right, so we're going to start our first section. It is the first blue section, the American court system. And here we have Kate has written it in blue in her notes. Great job. Thank you, Caitlin. Judicial independence is a cornerstone of our judicial system because it helps to safeguard the rule of law. So hopefully you guys remember rule of law. Kate, you know rule of law. Yeah, you should know it. Oh, she's trying to take notes. Kate does know rule of law, even though she's not in 8th grade because she had to learn it in Scouts.
I forgot the sentence.
Rule of law is that the law is equal for all people, so it doesn't matter whether you are the president, a Supreme Court justice, or you or me. The law applies equally to all of us, and we all have to follow the same laws in order to protect us from tyranny, really. Kate, honey, I need my book back. I really should have brought down my second book because I brought one of your books from school, you guys, because it's in much bigger print, but I also did bring my teacher edition. But that thing is like tiny. Any of you who've used it for notes, you know, like I have the same size pages, but my social studies book page is only like 3/4 of the page. The rest of it is teacher notes, so it's really small to read. Which is not fair. We have old eyes. It's harder for us to see that stuff. You okay? Alright. So, where were we?
After the first sentence.
Huh?
The second sentence.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Up there.
Rule of law. The belief that no person is above the law and all persons are entitled to equal justice under the law. Exactly what we just said. Sorry. If people are to have confidence in the law's impartiality, they must know that judges cannot be unduly influenced by those in power. The courts are where people go to settle disputes according to the law. In fulfilling this function, courts perform 3 basic tasks. 3 basic tasks. So we're going to learn about those.
Wait.
It's okay, you don't have to write down everything.
I'm just trying to write down one sentence. Give me this.
I need that. Go get the other one. It's in my bedroom. At least she's excited about taking notes. You guys should be this excited. Really.
Let me see.
See, so what she's doing, right now she's looking at the book. But you see this? So she wrote the section title, and now she's writing important stuff, things that she thinks are important from the text, which is something that you guys miss a lot of the time. I see a lot of people who write the section title, and then you'll write the subsections, but you skip writing any important information, which makes it a little bit easier, and you are meeting the minimum that I'm looking for your notes that way. But the problem is that then when you go back on the test and it has a term like, what was it, American court system, or rule of law, which isn't a highlighted topic, then suddenly you're like, I don't remember what that is, and it doesn't go well, So there we go. See, Kate has her notes. Okay. The courts are where people go to settle disputes according to the law. In fulfilling this function, courts perform 3 basic tasks, right? We're talking about the 3 tasks. They determine whether a law has been broken and what penalties can be applied. They decide how to provide relief for those who have been harmed by the actions of another, and, if necessary, they determine the meaning of a particular law or of the Constitution itself. So sometimes they're determining constitutionality. So hold on. Stop taking my book. Either go get the other one or just listen. Okay, so number 1, right? Determine
whether
if a law has been broken. Number 2 was to decide how to provide relief for those who have been harmed by actions of another. So when Kate steals my book, the courts can, if she actually stole it and did not return it, then the courts could say, oh, yeah, she stole your book, and then they could make her either return the book or pay me the cost of the book, right?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay.
What about
and the third one is, if they need to, they can determine the meaning of a law or the Constitution.
They can determine.
You don't need to write all the words. So, see, here's a common mistake that people make when they're writing their notes, is they write too much. So, Kate is writing down, like, the whole sentence. She could just write...
determine meaning of the law instead of
determine meaning
if
of...
they need to,
yeah,
they can determine the meaning of the law.
Exactly. So she could just write determine meaning of law / Constitution. That's enough. She'll probably remember that when she's going back on the test, although you don't have to take the test. Don't worry. It's okay. Your teacher already gives you like 10 Galileo things a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she doesn't have to go through basically reading the whole thing again, although it's open book this week even, because, I might as well make it that way, I figured. Stop speeding me up! They could just fast forward. It's right down there. You just click and drag, and then, yeah, right? Okay, so, yeah, open book this week. But you still get points for the notes, so do them. All right. Where were we?
After the 3 rules. Things.
Now, we're on our first subsection. Subsections are in what color?
Red!
So,
Red.
Kate's gonna use a red pencil. If you don't have one, that's fine.
Crayon.
But it is ideal. Yeah, it's a twisty crayon.
Sorry,
we didn't have a red pencil. Okay, so it is
a
dual court system. So in red, she's gonna write, and you're going to write 2, because you're also doing your notes, right? Yeah.
A dual court system right here.
Okay, great. Before the Constitution was written, there were no national courts. State courts decided how to interpret laws passed by Congress. Frequently, the decisions of the state courts contradicted each other, leaving people uncertain about what the law really was. So, if there was a law, and it comes into my court, and I'm like, oh, well, that law isn't right, and we're not going to follow that. And then over in Kate's land over there,
that law is right. We are going to follow it.
So people were confused, and if they're in my state, they're like, oh, I'm breaking the law. I'm not breaking the law. No problem. And then they go over there, and they're like, oh, dang it.
You're now in jail.
Yeah, so we don't like that, right? That's not good. So we wanted to make it more standard. So after we have the Constitution, we now have a federal court system who can handle that.
Yeah.
The framers sought to clarify this situation by creating a federal court system and defining what types of cases would be handled by it. Because not everything can go to federal court.
Federal court.
Waiting for notes.
System.
Tell me when you're ready.
Creating federal court system. Gucci.
Yay! Okay. Moving on.
Mommy.
What? Yes, I see. I got a text message. It's not a big deal. I'll answer it later. My students are more important right now. You hear that? You're more important than my text messages. That's why, we don't text during class, right? Yeah, it's a thing. All right. The Constitution created a dual court system. Dual means how many?
2.
Yeah. Dual court system. Alongside each state's court system, there is a national court system. It is important to note that the state courts hear the vast majority of cases in the United States. Their powers flow from the state constitutions and state laws. In contrast, the powers of the federal court system flow directly from the U.S. Constitution and federal laws. So, Supreme Court and our, I forgot what I was saying. It's okay. Probably wasn't important. Moving on. If you have questions, ask me. There's Remind. There's email. Reach out. I think I'm recording this.
There's comments.
Oh, there are comments. You can
Down.
comment on my YouTube video. Sorry. That's new to me, Kate. I watch YouTube. I just don't. Well, now I do. Anyway. And I think, like I said, I'm doing this a little bit ahead because it takes a while, and when I read for hours at a time, I end up losing my voice. So I'm recording this ahead of time, but I think when I publish this for you guys, we're already going to be using Google Classroom, so you can hop on there and send me a message too. That'd be fantastic, because then if another student has a question also, then they can see, has the same question, they can see the answer to it.
Or do a Zoom call.
Yeah, Kate really wants me to do a Zoom call with you guys, but I don't know. We'll see, because social studies not really people's favorite. I don't know that they want to check in with me. Yeah. Okay. So now we are to our second subsection. Jurisdiction. There's one over here. See?
Yeah, I got it down.
Oh, you already wrote it?
This one?
What? No.
What?
Yeah, you skipped jurisdiction.
Oh, I did?
Whoopsie doodles.
Well, I have space for
That's
another
okay.
one.
Sometimes we make mistakes. Jurisdiction. There are clear, if complicated, rules outlining which has jurisdiction over what types of cases. Jurisdiction means the authority to hear and decide a case. That's one of our vocabulary words. In general, state courts hear matters of state law, and federal courts hear cases that involve the Constitution and other federal laws.
Wait, jurisdiction means...
It's okay, we're not doing the vocab. See?
on.
I know, right?
Please.
Just hop on my Quizlet. I know. The Constitution gives federal courts exclusive jurisdiction, the sole right to hear a case over certain types of cases, depending either on the subject matter of the case or the parties involved. Look at the chart on this page for the types of cases in which federal courts have exclusive jurisdiction. Do you think this is going to be on the test?
No.
Obviously, Kate's not actually in my class. This is going to be on the test!
What's going to be on the test? What?
Right here. But guess what, guys? You don't need to write the chart in your notes, because our test is what this week? Open book. Because honestly, am I going to come to all of your houses and check that you're not using the copies of the book that I sent you? No, I can't do that.
That'd be weird.
That would be weird. It would be weird. I would have to spend my whole week going to people's houses and watching them take their social studies test on Galileo. Ridiculous. No one wants that. Wow, they're all gonna know you really well by the end of this. Yeah, you have no idea why she's so kooky, huh? No idea where she gets that from. Alright. So, concurrent jurisdiction refers to cases that fall under both state and federal jurisdiction. Concurrent jurisdiction applies when cases involve residents of different states and the amount of money exceeds $75,000. A lot, yeah. The plaintiff or person making the legal complaint can file his or her case in federal or state court. Under certain circumstances, the defendant, the person against whom the complaint is filed, can insist that the case be tried in federal court. Whether a case is heard in state or federal court, the court that first hears it is said to have original jurisdiction. If the case is appealed to a higher court, it moves to the court that has appellate jurisdiction. That would be, the appellate courts. What? Okay. So jurisdiction is basically who hears the case. That's what you should have written down. Read jurisdiction. Jurisdiction defines who hears a case. Okay? Now we're moving on to our second section of this chapter.
Structure of the federal court system.
Thank you, Kate. The Constitution does not go into great detail about the judicial branch or its structure. Article 3, Section 1, states simply that, quote, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The framers' brevity was partly strategic. Since the proper power of federal courts was a matter of debate and controversy, it made sense to be vague. Are you... Oh, you're looking at the notes. I thought you were just trying to, be in the video.
No.
Providing too many details might trigger opposition, which could delay or even prevent ratification. The framers therefore left it to Congress to decide what kinds of courts were needed. They were smart guys. All right, now we're in subsection. Judiciary Act of 1789.
Judiciary Act of...
Okay.
What?
1789.
1789.
In its first session, Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1789. This act fleshed out the details of the Supreme Court. It also proposed a three-tiered structure for the federal courts. The three tiers were the district courts, circuit courts, and the Supreme Court. While the federal judicial system has been altered in various ways over the years, the basic three-tiered structure laid out the Judiciary Act of 1789 has remained intact.
Wait, the district, the circuit...
The Judiciary Act of 1789...
Is the district court, the circuit court, and the...
What?
What?
Yes.
And what other court?
District courts, circuit courts, and Supreme Court.
Oh, okay.
You remember more of that than I did for a moment there. Whew. Okay, so that's what you should know about that. Kate hit the nail on the head. So.
Hit the head on the nail. Huh.
That sounds painful. Alright, next subsection, district courts. District courts are spread throughout the country and serve as the trial courts of the federal system. That means they have original jurisdiction over nearly all the criminal and civil cases heard in the federal system. Criminal cases involve violations of criminal laws, such as those against murder and kidnapping. Civil cases involve disputes between private individuals or groups, such as over money or property. There are 94 federal judicial districts, 89 in the 50 states, and one each in Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. There must be at least one court in every state. So, some of you might remember we talked about territories and protectorates of the United States, that's who they're listing out there. So it has to do with, because there are some that don't have them. So Puerto Rico has been considering statehood for a while, actually. They have, as they mention here, that court. So that would be something that they have to have if they become a state. They also listed, let's see, we have Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, and Northern Mariana Islands. We also have some other areas that we've talked about in class. Obviously, it was a big deal when Trump was looking at Greenland. We used to have interest in Panama. And yeah. But anyway, there you go. So those places have courts. They're following our legal system. Alright, so there is a chart here. If you weren't having an open book test, I would have you write this one down. But you don't have to today. Aren't we glad? But it shows the federal court system and how their cases flow. So they flow upwards towards the Supreme Court, but they start in these lower level courts first. Are you skipping ahead on your notes? You're like my students who like to type theirs. You can type them this week. That's totally fine. If you're typing it on a Google Doc or on word processor like Microsoft Word, that's totally fine. Just email it to me. Share in Google Docs. As long as you're doing your notes, it makes me happy. Alright, so that was the rest of that page. We're continuing on with the next section, which is, or it's a subsection. It's in red.
Courts of Appeals.
Yeah. The Judiciary Act of 1789 established a layer of courts above the district courts called circuit courts. The term circuit referred to the fact that the courts originally had no fixed locations. Judges would literally travel through the circuit, or designated region, going from district to district to hear cases. When they were created, the circuit courts had original jurisdiction over some types of federal cases. They also heard appeals from cases from the district courts. The Judiciary Act of 1891 transformed the circuit courts into strictly appellate courts. Remember earlier we talked about the term appellate jurisdiction? And I said something about appellate courts? So the circuit courts are your appellate courts. They have the appellate jurisdiction. Okay? Hence their current name, the Courts of Appeals. Appellate courts, appeals. There you go. Courts of Appeals hear appeals from district courts and also from those federal agencies that have rulemaking and rule enforcement powers. The United States is currently divided into 12 different circuits. Within each circuit is a Court of Appeals. In addition, there is now a Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. This court has nationwide appellate jurisdiction over certain types of cases, decided by one of the specialized courts you will read about below. So we're going to read about those now. Who knew? What?
Okay.
Yeah. So, now we're going to read this subsection. The Supreme Court. So that should be in
Red.
And then we're going to write any information about it in black below that. We have
normal pencil.
1, 2, yeah, normal pencil, blackish. Yeah. What? Thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. You're amazing. All right. We have a couple more pages still on this, but
We do?
we're getting it. Yeah, I know. It's a lot. It's a long book.
I'm going to name this then.
You're gonna run out of paper. Here, you can use my paper from the vocabulary too. If you
Okay.
need. Okay. So, the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court occupies the top tier of the federal court system. The Supreme Court is mainly an appellate court. The ultimate appellate court, as a matter of fact. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution does list a few instances in which the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. Cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those in which the state shall be party. The Judicial Act of 1789 and later acts of Congress formalized details of the court's organization. Originally, the court had 1 Chief Justice and 5 Associate Justices. Since 1869, the court has had a Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices. Congress has also passed legislation that has altered the court's appellate jurisdiction. The court receives some 8,000 petitions or requests to review a case each year. 8,000. That's like a lot.
That was not needed, but I wrote it anyway.
That's okay. If you find it to be an interesting fact, you can write it down, even if it's not necessary information. Totally fine. The court chooses which case it wants to hear. The cases usually involve major questions about the meaning of the Constitution or about federal law. On average, the court hears and issues full opinions on about 100 cases a year. That means that there's 7,900 cases that they've been asked to hear. They don't even look at. I mean, they look at them and then they're like, nah, not that one. Because they really want the ones that have...
Because I don't care.
Well, they're looking for the ones that have the most essential questions about federal law and the Constitution. So, all right, other courts. Over the years, Congress has created a number of other courts. Since the power to create these courts is outlined in Article 1 of the Constitution, these courts are often referred to as Article 1 courts. The jurisdiction of these courts is limited to certain types of cases specified by Congress. I'm sorry, we're in another subsection. I totally forgot to tell you.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, because the jurisdiction of Article 1 courts is limited, their judges are not subject to the provisions regarding appointment, pay, and term length outlined in Article 3. In other words, they are not appointed for life, and their pay is not guaranteed from reduction during their terms. You will read more about these courts in Section 2. Okay, now we're into another blue section over here. Appointing
Federal judges.
Thank you. It's hard to come looking at it in the screen, so it's backwards to me. The Constitution gives the President the power to nominate all federal judges, whom the Senate must then approve. Presidents typically take 4 factors into consideration when making nominations: legal expertise, party affiliation, a judge's judicial philosophy, and the approval of the Senate. Because if they're not going to get approved by the Senate, why are we going to go through this whole process? So obviously they're hoping that they will be approved, right? I think we're going to we're going to talk about each of these a little bit more in depth. That's the subsections. Kate, it's the subsections. Relax. So our first subsection is red, legal expertise. Though the Constitution twist it. Though the Constitution does not require it, most federal judges have been trained lawyers. Since 1952, the American Bar Association, ABA, a leading professional organization for the legal community, has issued reports on the integrity and professional competence of federal judicial nominees. The reports refrain evaluating a nominee's judicial philosophy or party affiliation. Presidents, senators, and media, and the public have often used these reports to assess a nominee's legal expertise. So they want someone who knows and understands the law. That's why most of them are lawyers, is because we don't want someone who can't read. A lot of law is written in what's called legalese, and so they use a lot of vocabulary and terminology that regular people don't use on a regular basis or know at all. Hold on. And so they want to make sure that when these are people who are interpreting the most essential laws of our country, of our Constitution, that they can understand and really interpret those things. So we're looking for people who have an understanding of the law. Did you have a question?
No, I'm good.
We're good. Yeah. Why are you so far over? Blue goes back over here. It's okay.
No.
It's okay. Teachable moment. All right. Party affiliation. That's
Wait,
another.
that's
It's
a
another
party
red
affiliate-
section.
Party affiliation.
Presidents usually nominate judges with whom they share a party affiliation. Not only is it good politics, rewarding one's supporters with judges of like mind, it also satisfies a president's urge to leave a stamp on the nation. Judges will serve long after a president has left office. Justice William O. Douglas, for example, served 36 years. Appointed by President Roosevelt, he retired when President Ford was in office. Okay. Now we have judicial philosophy. It's another red section. And we're into our last, well, it's 2 pages on here, but it's really
Wait,
less
just
than that because there's a
wait.
chart and then there's the questions at the end.
Judges
Yes.
can go more than.
Well, they're appointed for life.
Okay, so judges are appointed for life.
Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. Yes. And in fact, that is our discussion question this week on Kialo. So make sure you log on there. And the question is about since they are, after they are approved, they serve for life, and the amount of money that they receive cannot be reduced. That is in order to make sure that they cannot be pressured by new politicians in office, and that they can't be pushed to make certain decisions
So what's the next one?
based on political reasoning. So it's to protect that and ensure that they can make as fair decisions as
Oh,
possible.
we're on this one.
But
now? Oh, we're over
we're
there.
over here.
Okay.
But also it means that they're in that job for pretty much as long as they want once they've gotten it. So I don't remember exactly how I phrased the question, but it's something I wanted you to think about is that a good
Unless
idea?
they do a bad thing.
Right. Oh, well, unless they're impeached, Jaina. That can happen. Impeachment is not just for presidents. Mm-hmm. All right. Judicial philosophy. Presidents also want to appoint judges who share their judicial philosophy. Definitions of judicial philosophy often come down to whether a judge lands on a spectrum with judicial restraint on one end and judicial activism on the other end. Judicial restraint is the concept that a judge should interpret the Constitution according to the framers' original intention. According to this view, laws should be overturned only when in violation of the Constitution's original meaning is absolutely clear. The concept of judicial activism holds that judges can adapt the meaning of the Constitution to meet the demands of contemporary realities. According to this view, the Constitution should be interpreted more broadly as an evolving document, something that subsequent generations can interpret consistent with changing values and circumstances. So here is there's a chart. It shows the judgeships and their pay.
Opinions of this.
Right? I would not have you write that in your notes anyway, but it is interesting to look at, and it may play a role in how you want to respond to our Kialo debate this week. So look at it, but don't worry too much about the content and actually knowing that. All right. Opinions of the Senate. The Senate must approve any nominee for the federal courts. For nominations to the federal district courts, the tradition of senatorial courtesy plays a large role. According to this tradition, a senator from the same state as the nominee and the same political party as the president can block a nomination for virtually any reason. The other senators simply respect his or her opposition to the nomination and refuse to support it. For this reason, presidents either consult with senators before making a nomination to the district courts or simply nominate candidates whom senators suggest. Since senatorial courtesy plays no role in nominations to courts of appeals or to the Supreme Court, those courts hear cases originating in more than one state. Giving a single senator veto power over such nominations would unduly restrict the process. Still, most presidents consult with senators, particularly those from their own party, when making nominations to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. It is usually in a president's interest to avoid long, drawn-out confirmation battles in the Senate. Presidents know that senators can resort to filibusters and other tactics to block a nomination. Then again, sometimes presidents decide that high-profile battle over a judicial nomination translates into good politics. It can stir up members of a president's party. Remember, filibuster is exactly what we saw in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, when he would not yield the floor and he kept talking and he was reading the Constitution. That's a filibuster. All right, we are in our last section within
Checks
this.
and balances.
Yep. And you can see it's not even a full page. The judicial branch plays a key role in the constitutional system of checks and balances. It both checks and is checked by the legislative and executive branches. Judicial review, that's a red subsection.
Judicial
Review. The primary judicial check on the legislative and executive branches is the power of judicial review. As discussed in Chapter 3, judicial review was established in 1803 by Marbury v. Madison. Because of Marbury, the Supreme Court has the power to rule on whether laws or executive actions violate the Constitution. And you should hopefully remember that because we have studied Marbury v. Madison before. Alright, checks on the judiciary. It is a red subsection. Our last one. On the judiciary.
Judiciary.
Sweet. Okay. The appointment process, involving both the executive and legislative branches, is an important check on the judiciary, giving the people a say through their elected representatives on who will be their judges. But what happens once judges are in office? Can they be removed? Congress has the power to impeach and remove judges from office, but it is not easy. As you've seen with impeachment, we've gone through an impeachment trial recently. That one was of the president, but you saw how that was a long process. There was a lot involved, and no, our president was not impeached. He was not impeached. That didn't happen. Anyway. Congress has the power to impeach and remove judges from office, but it is not easy. The Constitution says that, quote, judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their terms of office during good behavior. Article 3, Section 1. Article 3 judges have no set terms and may serve for life. That was in that chart that we just talked about too. The framers thought that making judgeships permanent would help ensure judicial independence. It would free judges from being bullied by other branches of government or by the public. Even when it has set term limits for Article 1 courts, Congress has been careful to make the terms outlast any president's term of office. Since the failure to impeach Samuel Chase, discussed earlier in this section, it has been understood that political views are not sufficient grounds for removing a judge from office. 7 judges have been removed, all for serious misdeeds such as taking bribes. The Constitution further protects judicial independence by saying that judges' pay cannot be reduced during their term. This helps to protect the judiciary from undue political pressure or influence. The amendment power offers another way for Congress and the states to check the judiciary. An amendment can make a formerly unconstitutional act constitutional. Both impeachment and the amendment powers are a difficult process. The framers made them that way to build a strong barrier protecting judicial independence.
And actually, in my class, we learned about amendments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you should know this.
Yeah. See? 4th grade. She's already learned some of this stuff. So, hopefully you're maybe paying attention in 4th grade. Hopefully you're also paying attention this year in my class. I don't know. Some of you maybe not. That's why we review it over and over. But that is the end of our chapter section. And I know that I don't make you guys do the questions at the end, but sometimes if you read over them, I put some of those things in the test. And, yeah. Good to know. So, let me give you a quick peek at Kate's notes here.
Front and back of
So,
the first
she did
page.
front and back of this page. You can see she did she told me what portion this is for. It's 8.1, the Federal Court System. And then she has her blue and her red, so her sections and subsections within that. And then she doesn't have any vocab because we're not doing that this week, but then she wrote important stuff so she would remember. So front and back on that page. And then she ended up having to use a little bit more over here. But that is a fantastic job. So the only thing that I would change is, see, I really like this last section that she did here where she has the section and then the subsection in like that. That is a great way to do it because then it makes it really easy for you to find that information. So take a look at those questions at the end because it gives you some essential questions like number 1A, what is the purpose of the courts? That's a really important question. If you can't answer that, maybe you need to go back, watch my video again, make fun of how I make silly faces, because I do. We all know it. Or, you know, you probably should reread something. If you can't answer some of those questions, at least some of them, go back and review, because you need it, right? All right. That's it for Social Studies Storytime today.
Bye.
Thanks, Caitlin, for hanging out.